Hey!
Gotcha! Oh!
Can't catch me! Whoa!
The trip to Midoriya's apartment was entertaining, to say the least. Upon Kirishima picking you up from your place, you realize that the both of you were walking through Musatafu to get there. Kirishima had heard of the amount of snowfall that was about to hit the city over the past couple of weeks, and after some consulting with friends, he took their advice to not take any transport. Still, while wrapped up warmly in the chill, the both of you resorted to playfully throwing makeshift snowballs at each other, chasing each other in the street amongst others during the Eve's evening.
Hey! That was a cheap shot!
You called, feeling some of the ice trickle down your neck.
Nope, that was a sneak attack!
Corrected Kirishima, already with another ball in hand.
Oh, no you don't!
You quickly picked a handful to throw, only seeing it fall apart in pieces with a fling of your wrist. Kirishima's grin widened while he pulled back to throw his ammunition, until a rogue snowball collided into the side of his head, catching him off guard. He exclaimed while he shook his matted red hair, turning to find a very familiar pink-haired friend approach the both of you from across the street.
Gotcha!
Called Ashido, with a grin just as wide as Kirishima's.
Ashido!
You called, running up to her with a huge hug.
You saved me! But of course I did!
She exclaimed, warranting a playful pout from Kirishima.
Did the big mean shark pick on my favorite bonbon?
Ah, come on!
Whined Kirishima. You couldn't help but laugh with Ashido before you released your hold and hugged into Kirishima's large chest. He chuckled upon seeing you nuzzle into his warm clothes.
So, I guess you're on your way to Midoriya's?
Asked Kirishima, receiving a bright smile from Ashido.
Well, duh!
She replied happily.
Who couldn't pass up a good Christmas feast? Although I hoped that Bakugou would be the cook.
Yeah, it'll be a miracle to see Bakugou in the kitchen nowadays.
Speaking of which...
You started, catching Kirishima and Ashido's attention. Your eyes noticed a familiar couple ahead, trudging along the pathway towards Midoriya's general direction. You couldn't mistake that spiky blonde hair anywhere.
Bakugou!
You called out. Unfortunately, the couple did not turn or react to your call, still walking ahead of you.
Bakugou!
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 Called out Kirishima and Ashido simultaneously, while they began to lightly jog towards them with you in tow. Surely enough, the couple stopped, turning to find all three of you on approach. It was a brief encounter and conversation, finding the blonde to be irate about something before Kirishima pulled you along, excited about the idea and prospect of food soon to come. Ashido followed after, only to hear the echo of Bakugou's admonition of their excitement. You giggled while you followed Kirishima. His smiles had always been infectious, you thought, catching up to him almost out of breath before you made your way into the foyer and the elevator. After arriving and entering into Midoriya's abode, you were greeted by familiar faces that you had met back at Kirishima's reunion. Now being able to hold some conversation with some of the pro-heroes flitting about, until Ashido caught your attention, soon enough hanging around her, while Kirishima caught up with his friends, teasing Bakugou about his engagement. It wasn't too far off before eggnog was served, earning a drunken serenade from Kirishima and Zero. You witnessed the state both the men were in, until you turned to find Ashido's hands on her phone, recording the whole thing. She only gave a giant smile.
This makes for some good memory fodder.
She explained, not once dropping her phone from the show.
You mean blackmail?
You reiterated.
Hey, I'm not that cruel. Besides, with the way the two of you are going, this is definitely wedding slideshow material.
You felt your heart jump in your chest at the very forward suggestion of such a thought. You waved your hands before you, nervously laughing.
I think you're jumping the gun here. Kirishima and I are... Don't you start denying.
Interrupted Ashido while she slipped her phone back into her pockets.
We've all seen how lovey-dovey the both of you are. And Kirishima hasn't exactly brought anyone into our inner circle before you. You're the first. Okay.
You replied, still with that nervous energy.
But wedding is, a little far off, don't you think? You have a point.
Ashido conceded, earning a relieved sigh from you.
You haven't even moved up to the next stage.
That relief turned into slight dread hearing that from Ashido. Ever since becoming friends with her, she had kept you on your toes and had always been of the teasing sort when it came to your growing relationship with Kirishima. She was overly excited when you were the first to pop the question to start dating. Still, it didn't help that she was putting you on the spot.
What stage is there before marriage?
You asked hesitantly.
I thought we're there already. Really?
She questioned with a smirk.
Then how come I haven't heard you call him by his name yet?
You stood staring at Ashido before you felt your cheeks burn, turning your eyes away from hers.
I rest my case,
she commented, flaunting her smiling pride.
What case?
You questioned. You hesitated while you tried to collect your thoughts. It had been a while dating Kirishima. This was a fact since you've started training sessions with the sturdy hero, but the more you mulled on your thoughts, the more Ashido held a strong argument. You've not called him by his first name. It just felt...
I don't know how he feels about that,
you admitted, searching Ashido's eyes for any answers to questions you didn't know.
I mean, look at him.
The both of you turned to the drunken scene. Kirishima and Sero singing off key while Bakugou and Kaminari were trying their best to shut them up. More so Bakugou than Kaminari. It was a hilarious sight for many of the friends, but you watched how happy and jovial Kirishima was, even if he was drunk from eggnog.
Yeah? So?
Questioned Ashido with a smile.
He's so happy,
you pointed out.
And I don't know if I'm going to, ruin everything.
Ashido arched a brow at you, part confused, part irritated, until a large grin crossed her face, while she ruffled your hair. You quickly pulled away from her hand, fixing any strays that have conveniently fallen out of place.
You worry too much,
she assured.
Sarah's right when he said you two are alike. What?
You were only met by her wide and happy grin. You figured seeing how she and Kirishima went to the same middle school, they may have had the same environment to grow so confident. However, Ashido's next few words made you question that thought.
Kirishima isn't always what he seems. In a good way,
she commented.
I don't understand,
you remarked.
Well, I've been keeping it to myself for a while, but I can tell you this. Kirishima does have another side to him.
You cocked your head, confused and intrigued by her words, until the drunk caroling slowly died away, giving way to a more angelic tune filling the air. You noticed earphone jack caroling instead, along with charge bolts +1, surprisingly singing as well to back up the melody. All eyes were drawn towards them. That was until you felt a pair of hands grab your shoulders.
Kirishima!
Called out Ashido, grabbing his attention after Sero had left.
Bonbon's been calling for you!
Suddenly, she pushed you towards the man by the square of your shoulders, forcing your body to trip and fall into Kirishima's torso. His arms immediately wrapped around you while the smell of eggnog entered your sinuses.
It's Thumper!
He yelled, holding you tighter, watching Ashido giggle before she left the both of you to your devices. You turned up to spot Kirishima's giddy grin, holding on to an empty glass before setting it down safely on the dining table, which required him to walk towards it with you still in his arms. You wondered if this was going to be a repeat of his reunion, having a taste of his drunken self later during that night. In fact, it made you realize how emotional he became, how warm and tender, and to an extent, how vulnerable he was. Ashido's words returned before you took them to heart, turning your gaze to Kirishima, who hugged you tightly from behind. The both of you stood by the dining table after he had relieved himself of his glass of eggnog, watching the caroling unfold. He only just smiled, while his arms held on to you, nuzzling his head beside yours. You could feel every part of him, every muscle, all of his warmth, and his very heartbeat against your back. It was comfortable, wrapped in his arms that you couldn't contain a smile creeping on your face. Soon cheers filled the room when the sight of Midoriya hugging his partner out on the balcony caught your eye. You beamed happily at this public proposal, soon after hearing Kirishima bellow a congratulatory yell. You cringed a little, but that smile of yours never left your lips before you joined in the applause.
Man, I'm so happy for him,
commented Kirishima, his arms now draped over your shoulders.
Did you know this was going to happen?
You asked.
Huh? Nah, I didn't. But still, Midoriya's become the man he wanted to be.
You smiled up at Kirishima's grin beaming with happiness and joy. He was anything but this. A confident man who stepped forward towards anything in life. But again, Ashido's words returned. More to Kirishima? Of course, you thought there was always more to someone than meets the eye. That was nothing new, yet Ashido had painted it as if it were a fundamental part of Kirishima. Something that you hadn't grasped yet.
How about you?
You asked, catching Kirishima off guard.
Huh?
I mean, I get why manliness is important to you, but do you feel the same way?
Of course I do, Thumper.
He cheerfully answered.
And you're just as manly yourself.
Well, if you say so.
So far, the emotional Kirishima from his reunion had yet to surface. But after a few turns of events, you began to piece things together, realizing that neither of you hadn't spoken about the elephant in the room. That sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach began to churn from nervousness, before you took in a deep breath, despite the hint of eggnog in the air.
Do you remember that ground mission back at Naboo Island?
You asked, catching Kirishima off guard.
I was going to say... I mean... before I was knocked out, the last thing I saw was your eyes, and it was the first time I've seen you scared. You didn't want to talk about it then, but now that we're alone here, I just wanted to ask if you're okay.
The room was still filled with chatter and conversation, yet Kirishima stood still, his arms still draped on your shoulders. You felt him move behind you, maneuvering his arms to encircle around your waist before he nuzzled back into your neck again, as if he were hiding from the world. His breathing was calm, yet he kept you close. Again, like a shield. You began to wonder if you had the worst timing to ask such sensitive questions until his arms tightened around you.
I thought I was going to lose you,
he whispered. Your eyes still laid at the happy scene before the both of you while you listened.
I felt fear before, but never like that. I know you can look after yourself, but I never want to lose you, Thumper.
His emotions felt so intense at this proximity. It was exactly the same at the reunion, slow dancing in the crowd. And Ashido had been pointing out the obvious for a while. Kirishima was just as vulnerable as any other. That impression you held of his confidence, his joy, and his assertiveness was only one side of him. This was another extreme, or better coined, another dimension of him that you were allowed to see.
This I promise. I'll always be with you.
You held onto his arms while you laid your head on his chest, your lips near his ear, smiling at him despite his now downed expression.
I'm so happy that you are happy, because in that moment, I wanted to reach out for you.
You whispered before turning to face him, your head in his chest.
I'm here for you, Eijirou.
You smiled while you heard his heartbeat against your ear, indulging yourself in the warmth of his body that wrapped around you in his arms. Kirishima, meanwhile, was taken aback by his name coming from your lips. He turned to look at you only to find your eyes closed and enjoying his hug a little too much. If not for the eggnog, Kirishima felt his cheeks and his ears fire up. For a moment he didn't know what to do, standing still while you were in his arms. His eyes darted between his friends, finding Bakugou preoccupied, Sero missing, and Kaminari conversing and congratulating Midoriya. His red eyes soon turned towards Ashido, finding her chatting a storm before she noticed his eyes on her. Kirishima hoped for an answer only to find a large warm smile on her face. He couldn't help but smirk back at her, realizing her intent before she returned to her conversation, leaving him back with you.
Thank you, Thumper.
He spoke, watching your eyes look back at him, smiling. His nose rubbed against yours playfully, that toothy grin of his back on his happy face, before he picked you up in his arms, admiring you from above. He may still be feeling the effects of his inebriation, but his glee had no bounds. He finally had his answer. You gave him the best gift this Christmas holiday. He finally had you. Thank you for tuning in to another fanfiction reading. If you enjoy my content or would just prefer to fall asleep to my voice, please ring the bell, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I hope you all have a lovely Christmas holiday, and I hope the new year will be a happy one to follow. Thank you for visiting. I hope to hear from you soon, next we meet.